Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spaces Between. This is Gina Minardi, your host, and I just have to say, as I'm starting this episode on my experience with ayahuasca, I'm feeling a lot of feelings, some trepidation and some nervousness around articulating the experience appropriately and with respect and reverence for working with the plant medicine. And also, I'm just riffing right now. Nothing is written down. I'm just going to go with what comes up. So, I'll start by saying that I have done a dance with ayahuasca for about a decade in my healing journey. I think I had very typical fears that a lot of people have of maybe seeing things that you don't want to see, experiencing dark spirits or entities, or really just facing the depths of your shadow and being with that, being with the emotional, the physical pain in ceremony. And so I just did this dance for years. I would speak with shamans. And I would start, one time I really dove into the dieta and was very intentional with that diet and meditation. And then I in that experience, had a meditation where I was pretty much shown that I wasn't ready yet. So recently, through these different journeys that I've experienced in wanting to deepen, I would say, both my relationship with the divine or source or the universe. We all have different language for that. And just really wanting to heal intergenerational trauma and things I've experienced in my own life. And becoming a mother, I would say, has just really brought me, and life has brought me to this space to finally be ready to sit with ayahuasca. So I didn't know that I was actually going to share this part of what catapulted me to committing to ceremony, but I think, I would be remiss to not share this. So I'm a big believer in asking the universe for signs, and I think if you're really looking, you can see or hear the signs from the universe. And so I was in 1 week invited to 2 different ayahuasca ceremonies. And I was like, okay, life, I'm getting the memo. I'm a believer that when you kind of consistently, things get thrown at you multiple times, there's a force, or I almost like to say this energetic thread that is just pulling you, kind of tugging at you to do something or to shift something in your life. So I was on a hike, one of my favorite hikes, and I was really deep out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, okay, universe, I need a direct sign. If this lands on my mom's birthday, and if any of you have been listening to this podcast for a while, know that I've done a lot of work around my relationship with my mother and her passing from cancer when I was a teenager. So I just put that out there. If this ceremony lands on my mom's birthday, then I'll do it. Because in some way I was kind of like, yeah, fucking right. It's going to land on my mom's birthday. So the woman who invited me, and it was part of her birthday celebration, I asked her, when's your birthday? And she said November 16th. And I honestly, in that moment, didn't know if I was going to throw up or start pooping my pants in that moment, because I just knew, I knew I was going to do it. Yeah, so my nerves just really skyrocketed. And I do think this is an important piece to all of it. So I committed, and that was in September. And I also knew that I was committed to a psilocybin ceremony that was also in November. And it all just felt like a lot, which I talked about in the episode before, but was very divinely timed. As the psilocybin ceremony was kind of going in and clearing out the muck, so to speak, and was one of the deepest experiences in truly feeling the depths of my feelings and my grief and my rage and feminine wounding and just you name it. I went there in the psilocybin ceremony, which I really think kind of set me up for the ayahuasca ceremony. And so, but in this space, when I committed in September, there was just a long period of me just feeling like I was in kind of this like constant state of a panic attack. Am I really doing this? What is really going to come up? What am I going to be shown? Am I going to be able to handle this? Will I come back to being a mother? Just all of the things that the mind creates. So I don't want to go too much into this because I believe that I talked about this with the psilocybin as well, which speaks to some of my thought patterns. And I want to speak to that for all of us. All of us have very kind of specific ways of and different thought patterns and styles. Some of us can be a bit more obsessive. It's why things have been created like cognitive behavioral therapy and looking at the dysfunctions of the mind and thought patterns. So this really opened up an opportunity and the psilocybin to just dive in and just look at my thoughts, look at my relationship with my mind, and see that I didn't want the mental chatter to create and add this future projection of what I was going to experience because I had no idea. So it was the ultimate, this one in particular with the ayahuasca was the ultimate surrender to the unknown in all of the ceremonies, but this one truly, because I feel like I had just kind of been in this space of deliberation for so long. So from this space, I then grew very calm, very still, very soft, and very ready. And I just knew that it was time. I took the dieta really seriously. It was also very confronting for me. That's a part that I just want to say, because I think that that's sometimes overlooked. A lot of people will just focus on the ayahuasca, but the dieta is a huge, just as much as the integration post-ceremony. Those are both massive components to all of it. And the dieta being this Italian woman who I love food and, I have averted even seeing naturopaths over the years because I've never wanted somebody to tell me what I can and can't eat. And I know maybe that comes across as privileged or maybe a little bit gross, and I can honor that, but I really just love food. And so pulling it back was really just like, I don't know if I can handle this, as silly as that sounds. But it was just pulling back the layers. And also within that space of privilege really made me honor how many people in the world do not get the food, the level of sustenance and variety and quality of food that so many of us have access to. And I think that was one of the most potent lessons for me. Just really each meal and every piece of vegetable, looking at where it came from and, the energy of the food and how I felt from it. And I felt really good. I was hungry, but I felt really good and really light. So yeah, moving from that space, I'm going to just, I think, fast forward into the ceremony and what I experienced in these 2 days. Okay, so I'm having a moment where I'm feeling like maybe I'm giving erroneous details that I don't need to, from this sense of wanting to articulate every piece of the experience, but I'm also just going to honor in this moment that I'm also not going to be able to gather the words or articulate the magnitude of this experience. I'm going to try. Again, out of reverence and respect for the medicine. So let's just go into the ceremony because that's probably why you're listening. So the first night, I was describing this to a really close girlfriend of mine last night who we've had many, many lives together. And I hope she's listening. The first night was the most blissful, loving. It was like I was dancing with the divine. It was just, I felt myself on some level. There was a point that my hand was moving like it was dancing up in the air. And I had this vision, and it was like my hand was this interbeing, I would say. I don't know if it was angel, alien, but I was playing with another being. And I felt so much love, and I felt so much benevolence, and I just felt home. This is something I really want to speak to in the first night, is when the shaman started to sing the Icaros. It was like a part of my soul. There was just this deep remembrance of coming home. And also that, oh, I've been here before. And I have sat in many past lives with ayahuasca. So it was just, yeah, I want to emphasize it was just like this homecoming, and so loving and almost playful experience, and a lot of information. There was so much information coming at me about my life and my past lives and visions and directions of where my life needs to go. And so for me, just really like tuning into the magnitude of that, the amount of information coming through. And then there was a moment that the shaman came over me, and she was singing the Icaros. And I felt so much love. And it was this moment where I felt all of the love and support from all of my friends and family who knew I was going into ceremony and knew I had a lot of nerves and fear. I could hear people. I could hear people praying for me or saying, Gina, I love you and you've got this. And I just sobbed. I will right now. I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because I truly, something I've talked about in this podcast, and I think is hard for so many of us. Yeah, I'm probably going to cry a lot in talking about this ceremony. I received and experienced love at such a depth. It was just, yeah, I don't have words for it. And I have so much gratitude for it. And I just really, I just felt it like, oh my gosh, Sheena, all these friends and all these family. And then feeling really deep self-love, which I think I've struggled with my whole life. And I think is also, a huge struggle in humanity. Tara Brach, one of my favorite Buddhist teachers, talks about the trance of unworthiness, how so many of us just struggle with feeling worthy and lovable. And I'm just here to say, which is why, I'm sharing this podcast, you are so deeply loved. You are so deeply loved by the divine. And there is just inherent worthiness in your beingness. It's, I think, one of my other biggest takeaways. So, yeah. So that was my first night. And I didn't sleep that night, which is pretty typical for people who sit the first time. But I woke up the next day feeling really just filled with love and gratitude and, but kind of stimulated. And I just took a lot of time to sit in meditation and journal. And then I talked with some friends who were also sitting with me. And then also knowing that I was gearing up for a second night. And from me over the years, listening to clients and listening to friends, it's usually, the first day is kind of working through, you're trudging through the mud or relationships and trauma. And again, I can't say, there are no definitive experiences. And I realize that listening to everybody, in the room, everybody experienced really different things. So yeah, but I felt much more at ease the second night, but still, started getting nervous before we were all going to sit down. And again, really keeping this space of kind of, as the Buddhists talk about, the beginner's mind. Yes, I had just sat one night, but I didn't know what the grandmother or the great mother, as some call the spirit of ayahuasca, yeah, what she was going to show me, what I was going to experience. So again, I still felt very humble, and yeah, it was still working through, okay, I've got to breathe and I have to trust. So again, through all of these ceremonies, the trusting of why I was there, the trusting of spirit, the trusting of life. And so I had written down some intuitive things that came through about what I thought the second ceremony was going to be. But again, as the mind likes to come through, I said, oh, maybe that's just really what I want. And I really want a reconnection with my mother and, all these different things. And maybe I'm just creating that. And then the second night happened, which I would say for me was the most visually intense experience I've ever had with any sort of plant medicine the second night. And there were moments where it was so, I merged into, for lack of better words, the matrix of the universe, and no time, no space, and I died. There was no sense of Gina, no sense of self, and there was some terror in that, no doubt. There was definitely, I almost felt like this part of me clawing for, me, and, the ego really clawing, but I wasn't there. I had merged into, I almost had a giggle to myself the next day in naming this podcast and really coming to understand the things that I'm interested in and want to talk about. I experienced this space, the eternal space, no birth, no death. Like truly the space between, which was both so beautiful and so loving and also so big, really big to experience while I was still alive in a body. And, visually, I was just, going through all this sacred geometry and all these different, kind of what I would say almost dimensions. And the mother she just kept talking to me, and she just kept saying, breathe, baby girl, breathe. And I knew that's how it wasn't me, because I've never, never been able to be so soft to myself as to say, breathe, baby girl, and she just, whenever I started to get really overwhelmed, she would just say, breathe, baby girl, come back to your breath, come back to your heart. And I actually think this is I didn't know that I was going to share this, because this feels like very personal and vulnerable, but I guess that's what I'm here for, is just that. So I'm going to share this poem that I read coming out of ceremony the next day. So we're just going to take a little break and I'll go back into what my experience was. 1 second. Right here. So I wrote this the very next morning, and she said to me, just breathe, baby girl. Just breathe. I've got you. And you asked for this. You prayed for this, to be bathed in divine light and love, to remember. That's it, baby girl. I've got you. I'm holding you. Just breathe. It is so powerful to remember who you really are and where you came from, to walk through your individual shadow and through the collective shadow into the light. Just breathe, baby girl. Mama's got you and is holding you. You prayed and we listened, your ancestors and your guides, to remind you what a miracle it is to be alive. Just breathe, to learn again and again, to forgive, let go, and love. Just breathe, baby girl, just breathe. It is often said what humans fear the most in themselves is their innate power. We co-create with the universe. Just breathe, it all in. The dark, the light, the pain and the suffering, the war and the chaos, the joy and the love, the levity and the light. Just breathe. Just breathe. Don't ever forget the power of your breath, baby girl. Between your first and your last of many lives, just breathe. Just breathe. And experience the gratitude of your last. And I wrote in my journal, thank you, Mama Ayahuasca. I bow, I respect, and I love you. And I'm going to keep going because, we always apologize for crying, particularly women. And it's like, why? Emotions are so part of the spectrum of being alive. So thank you for being with that. That was a big share for me. So kind of wrapping up the second night, I reconnected with my mom. And, I haven't heard my mom's voice in over 20 years. My mom passed away when I just barely turned, I was like 17, turning 18. And I knew it was my mom because she said, "Sissy Miss." And it was almost like, "Sissy Miss, listen up. We've got to talk." And, on some level, this is so big to share. But on some level, I never felt fully loved by my mom. And my mom in so many ways was an amazing mother. She really was. She was so warm and she was so nurturing. But I know from doing all of this work and my own intuitive feelings and the pain in my body and the things that have come up in me becoming a mother, as they say, right? Trauma is stored in the body and your issues are in your tissues. And so when I gave birth to Carlo, and being as deeply sensitive as I am, so much came up in me in the first year about my parents and things I think that were very unconscious just sort of erupted in me. So there was this deep feeling of, did she really love me? I know she really loved my brother, and so in this ceremony, she just talked to me and that was really this huge moment of also generations of matrilineal healing, where it was like I was just listening to my ancestors and all of these women talk about feeling not supported as mothers and so overwhelmed and so under-resourced. And so I just wept, and I forgave on a level that I can't articulate. And I just felt her as a woman, as a mother. I was just like, oh, I get you. Like, I really, really get you and understand now. Being a mom is massive. It's the biggest job that I have ever signed up for. And, my mom had 2 kids and she was divorced from my father. And, my dad had us on the weekends and we were with her during the weeks. And, my partner and I have made the decision to not have 2 children because we know our constitution of, one feels really good for us. And we know that we can parent one, as well as we think we can. We fuck up and make mistakes. But so I just I felt my mom's overwhelm. I felt this feeling of a woman drowning and a woman who wasn't fully in her power and didn't fully love herself and came from generations of women who didn't fully love themselves. And of course, as I've talked about in this podcast before, there's so much wounding within the feminine and the patriarchy that sort of, I don't even want to go into this right now. I'm going to stay the course in the ceremony. But there has just been such a disrespect to women. And then the divine mother and the earth, and we are not separate. And it was so clear to me in the ceremony. I mean, we are really, now, of course, we have, in humanity, I've said this in another episode, there's been 200,000 plus years of war and violence and all sorts of stuff that we've gone through as humans, but we are really in an interesting space in time. And I feel in every cell in my being and in my soul, the earth, the great mother, she's pissed. She's not only is she pissed, she's like sad and disappointed. Yeah, like get it together, people, like stop us and them and, just everything that I've been watching, in the news over this last year and, from 2020. I think all of us, we just feel it so deeply. We're really in a critical space right now. And so we so deeply need to come back to our hearts. We so deeply need to come back home to our souls. We so deeply need to understand our interconnectedness with each other, and what one does to another is not separate. We all feel it, just as she, the mother, the earth, feels it. And, I know that there are very specific scientific reasons for global warming. And some people might sit here and be like, oh my God, Gina, she's really gone off on a limb here. But I was really shown, and I really felt in my body also where we are at with global warming is, the level of collective trauma and pain and divisiveness and violence and power over and men, I'm just going to say, who are really out of balance. That is my most Buddhist, skillful way of saying, and sort of living out their shadow while in control of so much. So yeah, so I digressed a bit, but that was the second night. And I just lastly want to say, I had an experience with just light and love that it felt like my body couldn't contain. That was one of the most intense moments for me. Was I felt like I was going to explode into a million pieces. And I know that this is not unique to me, and other people have experienced this in ceremony. Yeah, it's so important for all of us. And I don't want to sound like I'm on a soapbox. Like, this really just comes from a space of humility and love and just sharing, I feel like that's why I do want to podcast. We don't really sit around fires anymore, but in some ways it's like, sharing my laptop and this mic, I guess, is the fire. It's a 2024 version of it. I do sit around the fire in my backyard, and I love that. Yeah, so I think that's it. I think that's all I want to share. Some of it I want to keep sacred to myself, and I feel like I shared a lot, and that's, scary in some ways, but also I just hope it's helpful. I really hope it's helpful to you, and coming back home to yourself and to your heart and to your soul, and remembering, just like really remembering. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you. I've got so much gratitude for every single soul that tunes in to Spaces Between. May you find some time today to connect with your heart and your soul. Okay, much love. Bye.